The Volker Alliance, a premier good government group, has added a prominent federal technologist to its board. She was the Deputy U.S. Chief Technology Officer, later founded Code for America, a nonprofit that helps government at all levels with digital challenges. For an update, Jennifer Pahlka joins me now. Jennifer, good to have you back.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Tom.
And since starting Code for America, which you're no longer associated with, but it's kind of got a life of its own, what have you been up to?
I had the brilliance to step down about 6 weeks before the shutdown for the pandemic. And my idea was to write a book, which I did. But with the pandemic chaos, I also ended up helping match technologists with governments who needed them during those first couple weeks of the pandemic. And that became something called U.S. Digital Response, which should not be confused with United States Digital Service, which I helped stand up in the White House in 2013, 2014. So that was an amazing ride. I'm still on the board of USDR as well. Then went and wrote my book and did some other consulting during the time. And now I'm a senior fellow at both the Niskanen Center and the Federation of American Scientists, and just excited to join the board of the Volker Alliance, which I've just had such high regard for so long.
And with respect to that helping government when the pandemic hit, it must have been somewhat satisfying to see the technology base that was in place already at the federal government that allowed it to quickly pivot in most cases to everybody teleworking and, in some sense, not really missing a beat.
I think there were so many things that government at all levels did incredibly well during the pandemic that we take for granted, because that's what we always do with government. If it goes well, we take it for granted. And if it doesn't, we are quite concerned. Yes, there were the missteps too. So one of the other things I got pulled into in the first summer of the pandemic was a strike team, as they called it. I call it a task force because it sounds less violent, for the state of California's backlog of unemployment insurance claims. And that ended up being the first 3 chapters of my book. And I thought it was a great lessons for me to learn and that I could share through the book about what really underpins the problems of government technology. You know, the technology looks like it's the problem, but there are much deeper dynamics underlying them that we need to grapple with.
And tell us more about that book, because it sounds like something that the current crew and past crews and future crews ought to read, maybe, to help the government keep moving along the digital journey.
It's a book that I think a lot of people think is about technology. It has a QR code on the cover, in a flag. So it's clear that we are talking about U.S. government here and some degree of patriotism. But it's really about sort of what I came to conclude is a driving force of our dysfunction in government technology, which is fundamentally this idea that policy is this thing over here, and the delivery, the implementation of that policy is something separate that separate people do, and they don't really talk to the policymakers. And of course, we think of it as sort of a waterfall, a cascade, a linear process from, maybe Congress creates the law, it gets handed down to agencies and policymakers, et cetera, and down at the bottom of this big waterfall, you have the implementers. Well, it turns out for many years, people have been challenging those assumptions and realizing that those two things should not be thought of as separate, that when we think of them as separate, we are causing ourselves much more pain than we really need to. I'm excited to see so many people start to grapple with these ideas and really put them into practice and stop sort of saying, let's fix this on the edge here and really go to the core cause.
Yeah, so the implication is that good technology implementation really starts at the collaboration stage between people that make policy and people that have to implement policy.
Yeah, I'll give you one example from the book, though there are several. This is this local and state level issue, but when I was at Code for America many years ago, we started on the problem of clearing criminal records, where legalization of marijuana in many states have meant that somebody who has a past marijuana felony no longer should have it on their record so that they can access things like, jobs and housing. But it's a year-long paperwork process that most people can't persist through. It's just so much kludge and paperwork. And really, there's no need for it. And so we figured out that if these are just records in a database, you can query the database, find all the people who are eligible for that expungement, and, clear them in bulk. So that's automatic expungement. But the problem is some laws are written in such a way that there's no way to query the database and find all of those people. We had a law here in California called Prop 47 that was written to reclassify burglaries under $950 I think it was in commercial locations. Well, you cannot query the database. You'd have to go look in every single person's file and try to read, handwriting of a cop who took that case and see if they noted what kind of camera was stolen and try to figure out if that was $950. So these laws are simply unable to be automated, and therefore they're really going to have very little effect on the people. But if you consult with the people who understand the implementation of the law before you write it, you may make different choices in what you actually make expungible so that the law can have a real effect. And that's a kind of thinking that is, rare, but it's starting to grow. And I'm just, really happy to see that we can get implementation kind of all the way up front at the process instead of all the way at the end.
We were speaking with Jennifer Pahlka. She's former U.S. Chief Technology Officer and now author of Recoding America. And that example of where the law doesn't fit really with what the policy actually is, to say, in this case, it's okay to expunge these records. This is something I was talking to Senator Warner about not long ago with respect to artificial intelligence and the many ways that Congress could act on that by simply doing little block and tackling legislation to make things in sync in the way you've just described for that particular function of expungement in another domain, which gets to the big issue that Congress can't even do those little things anymore. When everyone agrees this is the policy, all we need to do is change Clause A, Subchapter 1, Paragraph B of this law, and it'll all match up. They don't even do that. That must be frustrating.
Well, I think we're going to have opportunities for the kinds of legislation that I'm interested in because this stuff is nonpartisan. There's no culture war at risk here. We're really just talking about stuff that benefits everyone. And I think there will be windows for it. But I can't fix congressional dysfunction, sadly.
Anyone that could would be a genius and would be showered with the crown of America. Let me ask you this. Since you were in government, a decade ago, that's kind of light years in a technology sense. And, now we have a company called NVIDIA, been around for ages. People used to be happy to get one of their cards in your computer because you could really rev up the gaming. Now they are worth a couple of $1 trillion thanks to artificial intelligence, which has come on the scene in a big way. What are your thoughts about good ways for government to bring this into the whole digital effort, really, that's never ending?
Yeah, I used to work in the video game business. I ran the Game Developers Conference for 8 years. And so I knew NVIDIA back in the day when it was gaming that drove their business. Artificial intelligence is fascinating to me. And I think I came to it a little bit late because I had been fatigued by the hype around blockchain. But when I started really paying attention to it, I started to see that this is a profound opportunity to bring our government forward. And I'll tell you one thing that brought me along. I was visiting the Department of Labor in New Jersey about the spring before I did my book, and ChatGPT had just come out. Now, you have this great team at the DOL and also the New Jersey Office of Innovation, wonderful folks, that they were working to make unemployment insurance just better every day. It's a fantastic strategy. They're not going for some big procurement. They're just bringing on people who know what they're doing and really fixing it week by week. One of the things that this designer was doing was rewriting the letters that people get, their emails, their letters you get in the mail about your claim, about adjudication, and they're so hard to understand. They're written in legalese. And it's one of the reasons people don't reply, and then you get a longer backlog. Well, she had been rewriting them for sort of 8th grade, 9th grade level, and then going to the policy team and saying, is this still correct? And then if it is, let's, bold the call to action, put it in big letters, then we redo the letter, and then people start to be able to interact with unemployment insurance a lot easier. Well, ChatGPT had just come out, and she was just feeding those letters into ChatGPT with the prompt, rewrite this so I can understand it better. Now, she still went to the policy team and checked it with them. This is not giving over decision-making to AI. It's an AI as an assist to somebody. And I asked her, so is it really helping you? She said, I think we're getting through these letters about 4 or 5 times as fast as we used to. It's not an automatic process. It's an assist. And I thought that is a fantastic use of AI, we should not be gating things like that. We should just let people do this. Now, there are things